Tootsies.
We started with being like, let's not swear. Let's try to make this like, nice sounding and
There's no
Yeah, I'm
way.
like, I'm in trouble.
We don't give a
I had to
It's
shake it so
impossible.
many times. I
Yeah.
started getting carpal
yeah,
tunnel.
just fucking say whatever you want to say.
Okay, fuck yes.
Yes.
My
There you
people.
go. There you
It's a
go.
proven fact. People who swear are smarter. It's science.
Is that true?
Yes, that's what science.
You would know better than we would.
You
We
know
just
what?
do it.
You know, it's we were talking about this at one point that I'm glad that there are swear words because when I meet somebody for the first time, I'll kind of sneak one in,
Yeah.
and it's right away I know, judging by how they receive that swear word,
reaction.
whether or not like this conversation or maybe the conversation can still go well,
Yeah.
but like a proper homie that I know I'm gonna like actually put in my phone and keep in contact
Yeah.
with, they'll catch that swear word, they'll wrap it up in a little nice Yves Saint Laurent speech bag and just chuck it right back into my realm. And then the people who are kind of shocked, I'm just like, this ain't
Yeah,
gonna work.
it's not gonna work
This
out.
ain't gonna work out.
I'm like that with, not necessarily politics, but just things that I believe in. I'll casually slide
Yeah,
a
just
statement in. And,
slide it in easy, see how they receive
see how
it.
they react.
That's it's interesting how we can communicate in more than one way, right? Like, I think a good amount of the issues that we're having in, well, America specifically, but just all over the world, is that we're only utilizing one dimension of our communication.
Sure.
Like these sort of things aren't happening as much as they should, right?
Yeah.
We're not having these long form discussions anymore. We're having these like ADD minuscule sound bites. Not even sound bites, it's texting, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to post say communication has many dimensions, right? There's like the physical rhythms where you can read somebody's body language. I was listening to something recently where they measured the rhythm of the heart. It's like an institution, I think it's either in London or it's in like Illinois or someplace where it's cheap to have institutions. Ohio or something.
Somewhere in the Midwest.
Ain't nobody gonna have no
Yeah.
institution in L.A. This is like real estate's bonkers. But they hooked some cat up to not a cat, like a guy, and they were rifling off just like different words, lawyer, marriage, children, and they were able to like read his like a physical rhythm coming
yeah.
from him based upon those words and those triggers, and those have to be happening when you're having conversations. You
Absolutely.
read somebody's body language, you read somebody's eyes, you read you get a feeling that in this new adolescent stage of communicating online, you don't have those tells anymore. It's just like, this is my black and white 1 and 0 description of who I am politically, sexually,
Yep.
religiously, and that's it. It's like, okay, hold on. You want to come over? I'll throw a couple swear words in right at the top of the conversation
We'll
so we
see.
know we're
Yeah,
cool.
exactly.
And then we have a couple
Yeah.
cocktails and we
Yeah.
can talk. I don't know why I got going on that train of thought, but it is interesting to see that was what it was. There's so many different ways to communicate
Yeah.
between humans,
Yeah.
beyond just words.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many different thoughts have just kind of gone through my mind when hearing you describe that. And one being that, when we're mass communicating in a digital level, there's oftentimes there's no emotion attached to it, right? And so I kind of reread and was that offensive? Did that come across in the wrong way?
Yeah.
And one of the things that my husband Luke has been doing and trying to get me to do is just like pick up a phone, and
Yeah.
have a conversation.
Right.
If I'm worried that if something I said might have offended something or someone that came across the wrong way, and I mean even the inflection in your voice, even though
Right.
I can't see kind
Right.
of your emotional response, gives us a clue, And another thought that I was having when you were talking about this is just, we're in the thick of this pandemic, and not to like immediately dive into that, but like
Let's
we're all
dive.
masked, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I've been really curious, and like, how can I let you know that I see you and I'm connecting with you, and all I have to work with is kind of like this
Right.
part of my face.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
walked into a gas station the other day and like had my mask on and realized realized I was just going to use the restroom, so I wasn't going in to buy anything, so I just
Yeah.
kind of walked in and like smiled at the clerk, but she didn't see my smile, obviously,
Absolutely.
and so I just like kind of walked right past her and was just like,
Yeah.
and I was like, I feel like she thinks I'm robbing this place right now because I can't like actually show her my smile or show her that I'm like just a nice guy coming in here to like use the
Yeah.
restroom. So I came back out and I was like, hey, I'm really sorry if I like freaked you. She's like, no, you didn't freak me out at all. It's fine. Like it's everybody's wearing masks. It's like you can't tell what's
Yeah.
happening right now. So it's very, very, very strange.
Yeah. And then kind of going back to what you were talking about in terms of the institute and somewhere in the Midwest, there's that study, right? There's that old psychology study. I don't know. I've heard about it. I grew up learning about it. But the cues of just kind of race and gender and having people react to images that they see.
Right.
And, you know, the beautiful doll is blonde hair and blue-eyed, and the ugly doll is, you know, has kinky hair and dark skin. And so that layer on top of wearing masks, too,
Oh,
as
God,
well.
yeah.
One of the conversations that I've heard a lot of kind of the BIPOC friends talk about is just they don't get the luxury of the benefit of the doubt when they walk into a gas station, right? And then
Right.
they have this mask on,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
even, you know, so
Yeah,
that's
more
even
threatening.
more threatening and hard to communicate who they are as a person. And so it's just so many different layers. I don't know. I
So
don't
many.
want to.
Sure.
I just dove into
That's
many
great.
different.
That's
No, I know-
awesome.
yeah, no, I
Things
That's
feel
about-
awesome.
like
You got some minerals
But-
to dive right in. I like it.
totally.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this platform to be able to have to communicate via uninterrupted, just like intentional dialogue between
Yeah.
people. I think people are doing more podcasts nowadays as it is, but this is something that Alan and I just wanted to do because we're just genuinely interested in other people.
It's just a
and
joy
Yeah.
to have a
it's
conversation.
just so good, yeah, because with where we're at now, it's so hard to actually just communicate with people and have a long form conversation unless you're like, booking out 2 weeks in advance a dinner date with your like partner and getting a babysitter and doing this thing and doing that thing. It's just like
Yeah.
actually being able to have this, and then for us to like archive it and have it on record for 10 years 20 years
Yeah.
down the road, to be able to look back on 2020 and have this stuff documented is going to be so special.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
and-
What was that conversation like between you guys as you landed on podcast?
It was me. Like both of my hands were kind of placed around his neck like this in this sort of situation, and I don't have strong hands, but I was like, "You want to do a podcast?
You're gonna do a
Yeah.
podcast.
No, it took a little bit of convincing, I think. And I'm going to speak for you, Jules, but Julian is a very focused, hardworking individual. And he, 10 years ago, right sort of in the midst of me starting to get busy with music, he had a 180 change in his life and was like, I want to be an actor. And all of his friends, like his whole squad, kind of like blinked twice.
What?
Like, what? Yeah. Like maybe a comedian, but an actor. What? We've never seen you act at all, right? The natural care for any individual, you're going to naturally just like have your
Sure.
responses. And he said, yeah, I'm going to become an actor, and I'm going to move to New York. And so while all of us probably behind the scenes were a little bit like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go.
You thought I was coming home in
We-
10 weeks.
Yeah, we kind of thought like 2 weeks and he'll be home, but stuck it out. Moved to New York,
Yeah.
and through the trials and tribulations of what it means to be a resident of New York, let alone like a broke creative art student
Sure.
in New York, he stuck it out, and he's been there for 10 years, and he's been incredibly focused on trying to do that and trying to like not allow all this time, this past 10 years, to feel like, oh man, well, I've put in all this work, and if I let it go, or if I relax, or if I take my foot off the brake, then somebody else is going to take my
Yeah.
position. They're going to take my
Yeah.
job. They're going to take my name and my relationships with these casting agents, whatever the idea might be that courses through his brain. And so I think pulling him aside and going, hey man, like what if we did something like this? This would be really fun to do. I think we've always had a dream to work together in some capacity. That's always been a like, oh man, 20 years out, like if we could do this, or we could do this, we could do this. And obviously, like, the typical story of that sort of mentality is that the 20-year out plan, if you don't start implementing it today, it's not going to be a thing. You're just you're gonna get into your 60s and you're gonna be like, oh man, we should have bought a boat,
Yeah.
you know, or we should have done that when we were in our 20s, and then COVID hit, and it was like, what better time? Like both of
Yeah.
our industries completely are. His industry's a little bit more back than mine, meaning there's some production happening still. Music's like, at least the live touring world is done
2022,
for 2022 maybe if we're lucky.
Maybe.
And even then, I think people are going to be pretty nervous about being shoulder to shoulder
Yeah.
with strangers. So yeah, it took a little bit of convincing, and I think the first month that Jules was here, he was pretty like, we gotta do it, we gotta go.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's been a thrill to be able to just sit down and we both come from completely different sides of interest, I think. Jules has like a real introspective interest in human beings, and I have maybe more of a pragmatic nuts and bolts interest in human beings. And so I think that hopefully benefits itself. I haven't listened to a single episode yet.
They're
so
good.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
no, they're good. They're
at
really
all.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed them.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you
Thoroughly.
listening, Ginger.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed them thoroughly, and I was telling Jules, I think before you walked in the room, I had no idea. I again thought it was maybe artist goods based. Now I know how goods this comes from because I've been listening.
That's awesome.
And I just have really appreciated that there's no roadmap with anybody that you've sat down with, and you've just allowed
that
the
makes me happy.
conversation to evolve. And there have been really poignant, deep, introspective, funny, real, authentic moments, and have felt uplifted and joy listening to them, and
great.
also feeling like, again, weirdly, I don't want to sound like a fucking creep, but like, oh, I already
Yeah.
kind of know Jules because I've been listening to this,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
cool.
So
Best.
it's really good, you guys.
I'm
You
glad
should
you
be
like
super
it.
proud.
I'm
That means a lot.
I'm proud that we just have the opportunity to do it. We've got Steve on the sticks, who's just a killer. My favorite part of the podcast is just hearing
Hearing him laugh.
Steve chuckle in
Yeah.
the background.
Yeah.
Steve, how's my gurgling right now? I feel like I'm like, my stomach is like,
Oh, I let go of
No,
a
you're
gurgle.
doing great.
Okay, good.
I let go of a gurgle on yesterday in a conversation.
Yeah,
It was
Jules
just
had
like,
it full.
we all stopped, just like, what? the
You know,
It might happen.
do
It
you
might
know
happen.
Chad White? You know
Of
Chad?
course, yeah.
So he came in and we were talking about food, and just mid him just going down some Oaxacan rabbit hole about Mexican cuisine, Jules just has this thing.
We're all just like,
What?
what?
You gonna be okay, bro?
Yeah, it was crazy.
Well, I feel like I'm absolutely going to be in that boat.
Yeah.
No,
Sometime
you,
throughout this
I
podcast.
doubt you'll be able to recreate Julian's
It was loud.
appendix
I was just like,
bursting.
how did that happen? Like, our microphones are up here. It was like, caught all of it. It was crazy.
It started in your ankles. That
I
was
know.
really special.
Yeah.
So we're live now. It's been live
Okay.
for 20 minutes now. We are pleased and honored to be joined in the studio by Ginger Ewing. Is it Ewing?
Ewing as in Patrick.
Ewing.
Yes.
Ewing.
I'm dating myself, but yes.
Easily one of the
I thought you were going to
greatest.
say I'm dating him. I was like, come on. You're dating Patrick Ewing?
Dude, what a thruple that would be.
Yeah.
Easily one of the greatest forwards of all time. Caveat there. Centers, sorry. But Ginger, you were raised and born in the area, correct? And Cheney, am I right?
Yes, yeah, good memory.
You went to Whitworth. You were a basketball player, right?
Good memory,
And then
yeah.
you, from there, started getting deeply connected with the arts community in Spokane. And our relationship started, like most of my relationships in Spokane, through my wife.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I'm not positive how you were connected, but you run a co-op, an arts collective in town called
Terrain.
Terrain. essentially, tell us about Terrain. Tell us what you guys do with Terrain, because I'd like to highlight that for a little bit. But I know we've already done something together where we really highlighted that. I'd like to
Yeah.
kind of dig a little bit deeper into some other topics, but maybe we
Yeah,
could talk about that for a second.
So we started Terrain 12 and a half years ago now, and just kind of a quick synopsis. Really, if you grew up in the region and you were from here, you were told this narrative that if you were going to be quote unquote successful,
Right.
and again, kind of based on the conversations we've had already, on like what is and isn't success. We can go that route as well. But if you were going to be successful or have fun in your 20s, you were going to do it anywhere but Spokane,
Right, you gotta
Washington,
leave.
right? You
Yeah.
have to leave. And myself and now my husband and 3 other of our friends found ourselves in Spokane and in our 20s. And despite this massive hemorrhaging of young and creative people that Spokane had been doing for decades, we recognized that there was still a very special group of people here doing really incredible things. And so our idea was supposed to be one night only, and it was really just to get everybody into one room for a single evening to see what would happen. And now in retrospect, we call ourselves a community building organization.
Okay.
And, art and creativity is our vehicle, is our tool, but really we're wanting to build community here in Spokane and the region. And yeah, so it was supposed to be a one and done thing. And fast forward 12 and a half years from that very first flagship event, we still do that flagship event. But we also do a whole bunch of other things, and that includes advocacy, that includes a retail storefront, that includes a gallery space, a performing arts space. We have a professional development program that we do with creative entrepreneurs. Actually, Teddy went through it. I listened to
No
her episode
way.
as
She's the
well.
best.
It's been really fun to watch her creative business grow. She's been a part of our flagship events like Bazaar. And then again, like I said, she went through Creative Enterprise. So we do a little bit of everything that has to do with cultivating a creative scene in the region and statewide and beyond.
That's so cool.
So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Do you notice any change in? I would imagine you're connected to so many more creatives than I am personally in the local area. During this whole coronavirus pandemic, creatives are typically relatively isolated people already. Has there been any change in the mentality of artists, period, or in the area that you've connected with? Are people like itching to get out and show their art off? Is it not affected them at all because they're primarily isolated people anyways?
Is
Yeah.
it changing the art?
Yeah, so yes, all of the above, I would say. The conversations that I'm having with artists here in town is some feel very freed by
Wow.
the situation that we find ourselves in and are making and creating more than ever. Some feel incredibly paralyzed and aren't able to create at this moment. Some are really finding their voice, reflective in the moment and taking a stand through their art. Some of the most beautiful things that I've witnessed, and as someone who is just a human being going through this pandemic, is how art and creativity helps us cope with moments like this. And so, whether it's Jenny Ann Mannon and Carly doing a Zoom app type thing, creating a song each in their respective rooms. Whether it is an artist who is taking a stand against, white supremacy through their art, whether it's just simply, turning on your favorite musician or band and allowing yourself to just feel, that's been a really beautiful thing for me to witness. And it just solidifies in my mind even more how important art and creativity are to transforming our cities, to transforming us as human beings, to transforming our souls. And so it's been, but artists are also fucking really struggling right now.
yeah.
They're amongst some of the hardest hit populations. And so it's this cruel irony of, art and creativity, again, just a clarification of what it means in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and us as individuals. But these folks are really, really struggling. They're not able to tour. They're not able to audition. They're not able to do all the things they need to do to make a living. And so it's been a really, I just keep on saying, interesting, weird, just gut wrenching, but also joyful thing to watch.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like everybody. This is and life in general, but obviously, again, we're spotlighting certain emotions, but it's a roller coaster, and some people are have a good day, and then you have a bad day, and I think that's again true in life in general, but really being highlighted in this moment. So
Yeah.
that would be my answer to that question.
So great. Yeah, you really have. It seems like you have such a finger on the pulse of kind of the heartbeat of the artistic community out here, and it must be interesting to kind of just be exploring and looking into the lives of all of the people that you know and have supported, and kind of being there to encourage them and to I don't know. It seems like a heavy load for you, because I imagine there's a lot of responsibility in that, that you're kind of like, like I was saying earlier before we started this, that you and Luke, your husband, are kind of single-handedly the responsible for the artistic community in Spokane. It sounds like, and that's not me like trying to make you sound like you're anything bigger than you are. It's just actually the truth. So going through something like this, when there's such a desperate need for art and for that culture to be coming out and making people feel happy, because it genuinely does. I think there are a lot of people that are struggling to create, and it sounds like you have been very instrumental in helping them kind of come out of those shells, or maybe not. I don't know, but I think you are somebody to be very appreciated in this community for having just kind of stood your ground in all of this,
truth.
and continuing to be there for all of them and us, and just to like show face and stand up.
You are being way too sweet, and I really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a martyr or give myself undue credit. We work our asses off,
Totally.
But there are a lot of really wonderful people also working their asses off, and so we certainly contribute and also benefit from a lot of hard work other people are doing as well. So, but
Yeah.
thank you. For
Yeah,
those.
of course. Thank you for doing it. It's so awesome, and I'm recognizing through coming from New York and feeling like I'm part of some like exceptional community that I'm not.
Yeah.
Coming here and realizing that there are huge communities of people who are actually so much more engaged in something honestly than they are in places like LA or New York, or these hubs where people kind of go because they expect to be the best of the best. And that's not to say that there's not incredible artists and people doing stuff in those areas. But you come to places like this and you realize, and you start talking to people who are kind of curating this culture, and it's so inspiring and it's so cool. And to relate it back to the conversation about how Alan and I kind of landed on this, I started to kind of see that a little bit, and I'm seeing it more and more and more through every conversation we're having with somebody. I've been kind of brainwashed a little bit by being in New York for so long and thinking like, this is where I have to be because this is like where it makes the most sense. And that's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I don't love it there and I don't value what New York has for me, but I have forgotten to find value in all the other beautiful places in this country, and especially in Washington State is my hometown, and I never spent any time in Spokane. I always kind of considered it like Spokompton, It's just like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
And now I'm here, I'm like, this place is fucking beautiful. It is so cool. Even with like the fire's burning right now, it's sad, but you like stand out on the dock over there and you're looking up at the vibrant orange sun, you're like looking at the lake and you're looking at nature, and I don't know, there's a lot of beauty out here, and it's really cool to see it and to talk to the people who are responsible for it as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that's been part of the growth of the creative community, but just the Spokane community in general. And it kind of goes back to that individual kind of self-reflective moment that we're having. And I think that we started to see that probably 6 or 7 years ago, where we, Spokane was always like a nice place to raise a family, and that's about it. And we always compared ourselves to other cities, whether it was Seattle or to Portland or to New York. And I started going to those cities. I'm like, this is fucking it, like this is. But we had this like second city mentality, and we started to see that shift, I would say, arguably 6 or 7 years ago, where Spokane started taking itself seriously and saying, no, like, we're the shit, So, and I think that, I think that I just remember a clear kind of paradigm shift in thinking of who we are as a community, and it's reflected in all of the beautiful people and wonderful things that are happening in this community. So I appreciate that perspective.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, it is cool to have an outside perspective come through and sort of highlight maybe the feelings that you've had. I've kind of always landed on this, like, I don't know if it's the rebel in me or if it's the anti in me, but anything that everybody else thinks is cool, I'm always like, there's no way that can be cool.
What about when they like your music?
Yeah, I hate it. Even I don't like. This is
I
funny.
hate everybody
no,
that
listen,
likes me.
Listen. Woody Allen always said this thing. It was actually like a quote that it's gonna sound really dark when I say it, but I'm fine, you guys. I'm fine. But he would always say, I don't want to be a part of any club that would allow me to be a member.
Yeah.
And this is kind of mentality, I think, which is like once you get it, you kind of move away from it. And I think any city, right? What is a city? A city is just a collaboration of a bunch of different individuals, right? So I'm sure you could I'm positive you can go anywhere in the world, and if you're plugged into the right ambassadors of that little nook and cranny, you're going to have an incredible time. It's not about the place or the circumference of the zip code. It's like the human beings who are in that spot, and there's really good people everywhere. And I think if you can just be settled in, if human beings could just be settled in this, like, tending to the portion of the garden that they can touch.
Yeah.
Not constantly looking over it's fun to look over the garden at your neighbor's situation and be inspired, right? Like, it's good to go to Nashville and be inspired by the community, but to, like, take a dump in your own garden just because Nashville has, like, hot chicken. No, dude, go to Nashville. Oh, this is so cool what you guys are doing. I'm going to show my folks back at home. Not like, God, I can't wait to get out of here. This self-loathing, like, oh, where I'm at is so lame.
Or maybe, like, make your own hot chicken.
Make your own hot chicken. Bring it back. Make your own hot chicken and, like, share it with the people. And this is the comparison thing, which is, it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be like it's either good or bad. It's like they can both exist at the same exact time. New York is dope. Nashville, LA, all these places are so cool. There's so many rad things happening and coming out of those places. But it doesn't mean they're the only wonderful spots and only beautiful canvases that you can paint on, man. There's like, it's endless. It's endless. And it starts with communication. It starts with friends. It starts with human beings. And tending to that portion of your yard that you can clip, that you can nourish.
And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here too, is I also understand, for lack of a better term, like the rat race of having to, like, also make it, right? And, Alan, I know that you spoke in previous podcasts about, like, the pressure that you feel. You have this team of people who are now out of work, and the pressure you feel to keep them afloat, and the pressure you felt, Jules, of going to auditions, and you don't want to miss that chance for somebody else to come in, and it's this very kind of capitalistic way that we function in this society that puts all of that pressure on us. And so I do understand. I guess my bigger point is like, we can paint this canvas, but then we also have to create infrastructure and support. So Jules, you can make it in Chowila
Yeah.
or Spokane or New York, wherever you want to be, right? And also kind of just get rid of the expectation of like, and we're not going to solve this in this episode.
Maybe we
now
will.
I'm
could
getting
try.
like capitalistic and socialist on everybody. Sorry.
good.
But you know, it is there's this dual reality of what feeds us as just human beings and what we need, and then just this unrealistic capitalistic notion of the world that we live in, and
Totally.
being, you know, just strangled, for lack of a better term, between those two ideals.
Well, have you always felt that way? Like, how did you navigate that when you were younger? Did you like always think? Did you think that you were kind of gonna? Because you grew up out here, Cheney.
Yeah.
So did you anticipate that you would kind of like get out and go do like the New York or LA thing at any point in your life, or were you like, this is my home, Pacific Northwest, like forever? I'm gonna develop an art scene. I know you went to college for like anthropology, and I imagine that, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure that ties into like everything you're doing as well through the education. But
Not
like,
intentionally. No. I did not have my shit figured out. So I grew up on Unsolved Mysteries. Robert
Yes.
Stack, God bless his soul. I love him.
do you still watch the reruns?
Oh, hell yes, I still
Really?
watch the reruns. And the new one is so good.
The new one's hella
Yes,
good.
the
What'd you
new
think
one's
of
Really?
What'd you think of the Alien episode?
So okay, I was actually working through the Alien episode, so I need to go back and rewatch it. But my mom like immediately called me, and she's like, "Okay, yeah, this is even better than the original." Like,
Really?
it's good. And they did the
Nice.
perfect thing. Like, no one was ever gonna replace him as a narrator. The fact that they don't.
Right.
I'm sorry, I can geek out.
Go.
On, like,
Please. This is what this is for. Geek out on Unsolved the Mist.
How good's this?
Yeah. But yeah, so I grew up in Unsolved Mysteries. I, from a pretty early age, from a pretty early age, I like 100% knew that I needed to connect with my community in some way. And again, kind of going back to the narrative that we're fed as kids, I thought that meant that I need to work with, you know, underprivileged youth or whatever that happened to be. And while those things are obviously, you know, critically important, as I've evolved and I've grown, I've also recognized that just as important is, you know, creating spaces and places for connections to be made. You know, creating spaces and places where people feel like they have a voice, or they feel like they have that they belong. Creating spaces and places where, you know, an 85-year-old white woman and a 12-year-old black trans teen feel like they equally belong together, and that was just as vitally important. And that has been a journey in kind of my evolution and thinking. And really, it wasn't probably until 6 or 7 years ago where I started really thinking, okay, this is my life's path. But yeah, so I thought I was going to be a forensic anthropologist, and so after my undergraduate work at Whitworth, I went and got a certification in forensics, and it was through that work where I started to recognize that at the time there were only 2 forensic anthropologists in the entire state of Washington, and really
Whoa.
you needed to kind of go through the collegiate route. You know, I would become a professor, and then if a case came up that needed forensic anthropologist, then I would, you know, lend that my talents. And that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I knew Spokane was where I wanted to be, so I was very, you know, clear about that. And so I thought, okay, what else could I fall in love with? And I love Spokane. I love the history. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be a historic preservationist. And
Oh, wow.
I was $41,000 in debt from
Sounds about
school,
right.
maybe a little bit more. And so I thought, okay, this time around, I've got to, know that this is where I'm going to go. And so I started looking around town and thought, okay, where is historic preservation taking place? And I thought of the Campbell House. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Campbell House.
Totally.
So I started volunteering at the Campbell House, and within about 8 months of being a volunteer at the museum, they offered me a contract position. So my first job there was via a NAGPRA grant, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So I'm going to bore you for a second, but it was a federal law that was passed in 1993. And if you have items that fall under NIGPRA, so human remains, objects of cultural patrimony, burial goods, you have to go through this federal process and repatriate them back to the appropriate tribe.
Whoa.
And so the museum had a collection that fell into that category. So I worked for a couple of years on working with the tribe and working with the federal government to repatriate that collection back to the tribe. And then after that, I became the American Indian educator at the museum. And then '08 hit, and there was some massive restructuring within the museum, and I then became the curator for cultural literacy. So it was really through that time period where I started being more and more exposed to art and creativity. We started Terrain right around that time as well. And that is kind of how I've evolved and grown into the field. Although, it took me another 6 or 7 years before I realized that this was going to be my life's work. I thought we would do, the flagship event once a year, and that would be it. And I would be a tribal lawyer, or I'd be, something else. But
Were you, sorry, Alan, were you like feeling really connected to all that stuff, right? When you were like, I'm going to bore you guys for a second, and you started dropping all that information on us, and like, was that stuff like deeply connecting with you, and you were feeling like really kind of motivated to do that work, and were you feeling inspired by it, and that's why you kept going?
yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that when I reflect on kind of the choices I've made professionally, again, it has always gone back to community, connecting with my community in some capacity. And so I think that's like the thread that kind of binds, whether it was going to be a tribal lawyer or actually when I was through with my contract as the NIGPRA contract, National NIGPRA approached me about potentially moving to DC and working for the federal government. But my husband and I had just met. We had just started this little thing called Terrain, and so I wanted to stay in Spokane to see what would happen with that.
Wow.
You have you have seemingly a portion of your being that really wants to stand up for folk that don't seem to have as much of a voice as maybe they need. Where does that come from? Is this can you pinpoint a place where you're like, I really just did you just wake up one day and you felt like there was a need for some energy in that portion of the world? Was it you had a sibling, like, does that question make sense?
It does make sense. And to be quite honest, I don't know. I mean, I think my first response to that question would be, take a look at me. I've always been the other,
Yeah.
And so I know what that feels like on a very deep, visceral level. But obviously, all the things I ticked off just then, I can't relate to all of those experiences. And so I don't know. I'm kind of perplexed by that question. I don't know. But I do think it probably is. My mom has instilled in me just a love for people. And I was blessed with a really incredible childhood and high school experience and college experience, and just a deep love for people and animals and just beings in general. And then always wanting to root for the underdog.
Yeah.
Oftentimes being seen as the underdog. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
a good amount of the time, I think folk who feel like the other, they don't come out of that scenario or situation with a desire to help. I think they're somehow naturally a chip on their shoulder happens, and it's throw up your elbows and it's me against the world. Rarely, not rarely, but I just find it interesting that you obviously you felt growing up being the other, especially in the Spokane community, but yet you took that energy and you adapted it towards giving and kindness and compassion, and that's so cool. I think that's just like really, really awesome to see. I wish that I had a little bit of that.
Same.
You absolutely have a little bit
Well,
of that.
it sounds like you kind of developed your own creative voice through elevating others, which is very compassionate and really cool. And I imagine that came from a need to express yourself through feeling that way that you felt growing up. And it's God, it's so cool. And what was the experience like? We've quoted the other several times. Like, what is that? What do you mean when you say that? What is that experience like for you?
Yeah. Well, I okay. So I will talk about this in a way that I live a really blessed life, and
Sure.
I have a really beautiful life. So I want to underscore the conversation with that. But one of my very earliest memories was my mom got a flat tire in Cheney, and it was after hours. She's a single parent. She drove into, a mechanic's, automobile place, and he was really friendly to her and said, yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter that we closed 15 minutes ago. I'll help you. And then he turned and looked at her black child and was like, no, you need to go elsewhere. And so that was one of, a very early memory.
So
of
sorry,
mine.
your mother is
My mom's white, my dad's
and your
black.
dad's black.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I remember the very first time I was called a nigger on the school bus, and I didn't know what that word meant, but I knew it was bad because of the inflection of the person's voice, the body language that we
Sure.
talked about earlier. I was an athlete, growing up, and would go to small towns like Colville and be called a nigger while playing basketball in the crowd. And so, or it's more simple things like I don't remember seeing someone who looked like me on the cover of a magazine until my sophomore year of college. It was the Tyra Banks, swimsuit, Sports Illustrated. And that was the first time I was like, oh, she looks like me. So there's this sense of like what's beautiful, what's not, what's desirable, what's not. And so it's, even though I have a lot of self-confidence and I had, incredible upbringing, you internalize those things and they very much become a part of who you are and your identity. I had an incredible group of friends growing up. I was in the quote unquote popular crowd, but I was never the desirable girl. I was never, and so those kind of mundane, or not so mundane, I've gone into. I still will get tailed in like, here's an example. I run a retail storefront in River Park Square, and I still will get tailed in River Park Square when I go into shop, and so it's
Why?
Because I'm black, and so it's just it's deep and it's systemic and it's or I'm questioned about my success, right? So, the reason why she's been successful is because, she's the token person who got in because she's black. She's not qualified. It's because she's black. I was accused of sleeping my way into my position at the museum, so it's just like, it's just life experience. And so that's what I mean by the other. And again, I don't want to sound overwrought.
Not at all. Thank you so much for sharing that.
For sharing that
It's no,
experience.
truly. And I wonder, you said you grew up with a single mother. So we don't have to go too deep into it, but
You can go as deep as you
okay,
want.
cool,
I'm super
sweet,
transparent.
love it. Was your dad around?
He was around.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so did you have a really hard time identifying then as like black or white, and then like because you were raised by a single white mother, did you feel more like identifying as a white woman, or because of the skin color that you have? First and foremost, let's just let the world know, and they can see if you're watching on YouTube that you're absolutely stunning and gorgeous, and
you're
so like
sweet.
I'm not, like it's the best.
sweet.
But like, did you have a hard time identifying as one or the other? I imagine that's a really difficult thing to try to navigate,
Yeah.
especially when you're young.
Yeah. So I think some people do. And maybe this goes
me.
back to just my personality. I've always felt blessed that I had the best of both worlds. Like I got to learn from two amazing cultures, and that made me a deeper, more whole person because of that. Has always been my attitude, and part of that is probably my mom and just the way that she raised me. And again, she's a scrappy single parent who, like, we've got this, we're gonna do it. And so I never felt less than or torn or split between my identity growing up. That said, it was probably, junior high where I started to recognize that, 'cause I would always self-identify as mixed at the time, but I started to understand how the world saw me. And it was very, very clear that I was, a black girl or a black woman. And so I definitely now just identify as black because that's how the world sees me. And I don't think that that's denying any part of me, but it's just reality. It's how the world sees me. And so I do, because I was, mostly raised by my white mother, I have had to seek out black culture. And it was something that I had to go after versus something that was instilled in me from an early age. Again, my dad was around, but he didn't raise me. And so, yeah, it was a culture that I sought out and I learned from, and I'm still seeking out and learning from. But it was also an acute awareness of how the world interprets who I am as a person, and responding and reacting and evolving, because of that, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that experience.
Yeah, it's so
we
hard.
can't. We won't. We never will. Nor will we know what it's like to be a female or
Yeah.
a black female. I don't know, and I don't even know what really to say. Because I can't. It's just incredible, and
Yeah.
I just try to like have empathy, but I don't because I don't have that lived experience, and I don't know. I just have a lot of respect for you, I guess. And think like the challenge of finding your identity and getting to where you're currently at is so astonishing because you've kind of taken the adversity and turned it into something really beautiful and manifested it in this like artistic way where you have elevated other artists who I'm sure you that have resonated with you through your own experience that you have been able to kind of curate and like kind of probably make sense for you probably, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but you may have like started to understand yourself more through other people's art that you've been able to curate for yourself, and as you've kind of grown through this process, gotten to know yourself and understand yourself even better through all of that. Because you do art as well? Do you create? Do you?
No, I have a good eye, but no, I very much consider myself an arts administrator, educator, advocate. I don't consider myself an artist. There are artistic tendencies within me, but I consider myself an administrator, advocate, educator.
I'd like to go back, Ginger, if you wouldn't mind. So, feeling, growing up like you were the other, you were different. Was there ever a moment where you felt really, really connected, really a part of something, really like, this is where I belong? Did that moment happen with you? Because I mean, for me, I think I felt that way a little bit. I mean, I'm a really small town, and my father was the minister. You felt like, well, kind of everybody. Nobody's gonna say that one thing around me because I'm the tattletale, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that might be. I think, I personally manufactured these filters that informed a good amount of my life, and I moved to Seattle and kind of like jumped out. I had to leave in order to really like find that security and that identity, and yet you've stayed in the area. Have you found that place? Did you find was there a moment where you're like, that this is where I belong and I'm comfortable here? And
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is gonna, maybe I sound overconfident. I also am a Scorpio. I'm stubborn.
Get it.
So I've always been like, fuck that. I belong. You know,
Yeah. Good on you.
it's
Oh, yeah.
it's you that has the problem.
Yeah,
it's
good
not
on
me.
you. Good on you.
And I will say that that confidence has been a little bit shook in this moment. And I have, 6 months ago, I would have told you that you would not have found a bigger fan of Spokane than me. And Spokane is challenging me in this moment. It really is. And, I don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer, but here's another example, and I'll get to a larger point. And it's also going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, and I'm not. That's not what I'm trying to do. But the YWCA does a Women of Achievement Award every year, and I won it last year for arts and culture.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
But I was a guest of Lisa Brown. She's former senator of ours, works for the Department of Commerce. I was a guest of her 2 years prior. And it's always right around our flagship event in October, the first week of October. And I was running a little bit late because I was, overwhelmingly busy. And I'm sprinting into the event, and I literally was spit on by somebody because I was black. Like they were very clear
why,
on why
right.
they were spitting on me. So a year prior, I'm going into the event and I'm spit on, and then the next year I win the award, right? So there's that weird juxtaposition,
dichotomy,
that
yeah.
dichotomy, right?
So weird.
And I have always been able to kind of just like let it slide, laugh it off. I'm going to be super transparent with you guys. Like I have felt a lot of pressure if I can just show the world that there are, like I can be a good example of like a good black person, then like maybe that hate in your heart will go away. And, in my social media feed, being confronted with, racist comments or whatever. But if they know me and they love me, then maybe that can be their bridge to get rid of the hate in their heart or, whatever. And I've
Such a
always
burden.
tried to be that person. And a lot of people of color try to be, like there's this, code switch that, constantly happens. And so, I have been kind of the token black person as terrain kind of rises in its presence in Spokane around a lot of tables. And I have in some ways been okay. I've been aware of it, but I've been okay of it because if it advances collectively, BIPOC, people in the community and cool, whatever. And so oftentimes I felt like I was accepted because I was like black with a lowercase b versus black with like a lowercase. I wasn't like black. I was
Oh,
black,
wow. Yeah.
And so I'm kind of going off down a rabbit hole, but in this moment, there is a lot of lines in the sand being drawn from multiple people. And Jules, to your point, earlier you said like I will never know what it feels to feel like that. And that's okay. Like your experience is just as valid. And really all it takes is us is having these conversations and understanding each other and empathizing with each other and seeing the humanness with, each other. You don't need to have my experience, and that's okay,
Right.
And my point is, I'm getting there, is there have been a lot of just crystal clear lines drawn in the sand. And in many ways in this moment, from business leaders, city leaders, and I'm just being very general. Of course, there's been some wonderful people as well. I have been really incredibly heartbroken by their response to what is happening right now. And so I've been really challenged in my love for Spokane at the moment on a kind of social justice, equity, anti-racist level. And we have a lot of work to do. And just like we have a lot of work to do in the rest of the nation and the rest of the world, but my love for this community has been challenged. But again,
You have faith.
I have faith.
Yeah.
I always have faith.
Yeah.
That was a weird rabbit hole to go
No,
down
it was
to.
great.
So,
No, we do appreciate that.
No,
I
thank you for
apologize,
being
but-
transparent, and thank you for sharing with us. I just count it as a privilege to be able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who, like, I don't feel like you're throwing up any sort of walls or any sort of, like, you're being incredibly kind and transparent in your dialogue about these, like, what must be really difficult things to talk about, or maybe at least to continue to have to talk about, right? Like, I would imagine as an African American or a black woman to continue to have to talk about the same thing over and over and over again and answer the same questions over and over. It must get exhausting.
Yeah. But that's actually been one of the interesting things that's happened in this moment, and I feel lucky for is, it's exhausting. It's cyclical. With Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. It's, for me, honestly, like, when this first started to happen, I wasn't paying that much attention because it was just yet another person, and we were going to talk about it for a day or two, and then it was going to go away again. And then I got really, really, really angry, and in a way that I've never been angry in my entire life. And for a good 6 weeks, I was really fucking angry.
How did that manifest?
It was like, fuck you. I'm not, like, this is your problem to solve. I'm, I'll sit down and chat with you, but, like, this is your problem. You guys created this shit. You fix it. You're like, I'm done, and just being, for the most part, I tried to kind of channel it into constructive things. I was calling people out on their racism. I was calling businesses out on their racism. I would email them or have a phone conversation with them. But, like, all my old kind of just, like, I don't even know the word I'm looking for, of just, like, bridge building mentality. I was just, fuck it all. Let's burn this motherfucker down.
Yeah.
Let's start over.
Yeah,
and I still kind of have that mentality,
Yeah.
trust me.
Yes.
But it was actually kind of freeing too. And it was about 6 weeks of that before I shed a single tear. Like, I just didn't even have the, like, emotional capacity to feel sad. I was just really fucking angry. And now I feel all of the different emotions. And I will say that in the 41 years that I've existed on this planet, I have never felt more hope that change actually might be possible, even if it's small. Like, the needle would be, moved a little bit, and it is because of conversations like this. It's my white woke friends that are still pounding the pavement and speaking out and saying that this is not okay. And so that, amongst, a whole collective of, a lot of other people as well. But the fact that we're still having this conversation, 4 months down the line, 5 months down the line, brings me a lot of hope. So I feel like we're in this moment where there's like this baby just kicking and screaming and having a tantrum, because change is hard and change is messy, and there's that gurgling that I was talking about. Change, takes really, really difficult, candid conversations and vulnerability, and it's scary, but it's still, these conversations are still happening, and that just fills me with hope. And if I'm being super transparent, I'm also guarding my heart. I'm like, I have a wall around my heart because I'm preparing to be disappointed as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Because we've always been disappointed.
Yeah.
So it's this weird kind of back and forth. But generally speaking, what is happening is fucking awesome. And again, like I said, it's hard. And it's emotionally draining and exhausting. But so worth it, because it just feels like the tiniest needle point of light at the end of the tunnel, of just a step forward in the right direction.
Where do you find solace? Do you have a have a meditation routine? Do you do yoga? Do you work out? Like, how do you manage that exhaustion?
I don't.
And she just work.
It's a garbage bin of, as you guys were talking about earlier. I'm really bad at that, and I think a lot about like how do I take care of my body and my
Yeah.
soul so I don't burn out and I
Right.
don't become bitter.
Yeah.
And I'm not really good at it. So if you guys have any pointers, let me know. Call me.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not really
Julian's
good
a
at
little
it.
better at it than I am.
Yeah.
I've really slacked off, but when I'm traveling, I'm usually pretty good at like taking it, because it takes so much. I mean, you being a community leader and having so many people on your shoulders and caring so deeply for so many different lives, right? Like, you have 3 pugs that you've adopted.
Yeah, they're
that-
the best.
I mean, I have bulldogs.
Yes.
And like, I know when we decided to get a bulldog, I was like, you realize how many problems bulldogs have,
Yes.
right, babe? She's like, yeah, but they sound smushy, smushy, smushy. And it's like, yeah, but it's going to be awful, you know? And of course, 4 years into my relationship with my bulldogs, I would take a bullet for each
Yeah.
one of them twice.
Yeah.
But you have seemingly this like well of space in your heart for the underprivileged and the cast out and the artists and
The flat-faced dogs of the world.
the flat-faced dogs, the pugs of the
Yes.
throne, the shelter dogs, right?
Yeah.
And it does take so much to do it. I'm interested in the thought experiment of like how more powerful you would be if you went to the sauna like a half an hour a week, or you
Yeah.
went to like a meditation practice. You see a therapist, you and your
No.
husband must just like have it out and talk constantly, and like you guys are each other's rock. You seem that way.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree. I mean, our relationship has its own issues and troubles as well, and we actually could be much better. We have seen a marriage therapist in the past. We're not seeing one now. I don't do individual therapy. I think everybody benefits from therapy. I should probably go. But I think that it's, again, it's this transparency. We're just really
Yeah.
transparent. We
Yeah.
don't take each other's shit. We argue a lot.
I think that's
you
the
know,
most important thing you
Yeah,
can
and
possibly do.
there's no, we don't have this perfect relationship. We have certainly, thought about separating, numerous times. And if I'm being super transparent, terrain is probably the reason why we're still together. Because as shitty as it sounds, there's this like very public, interpretation, personification of who we are as a couple. And we've been scared to like shatter people's ideas of us,
Wow.
which again is like, it's not pretty, but it's the truth. And so it's probably held us together in a way that we might not have gotten through if it wasn't for like this idea of who we are as a couple, which is very different than who we are as a couple.
Well,
That's why it's your baby.
It can
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can think it looks ugly, but I would push back on that idea that when you decide to commit yourself to another person, you're naturally going to bring on other things. You're
Yep.
going to, if you, my marriage, same thing. We talked about it the other day when Taz was on. It was like, man, it would have been so difficult for us because she was through the process of immigration and she was Australian. It was like it would have been more of a hassle for us to break up and her to go home than for us to just sit down and talk
Yeah.
through our bullshit.
Yep.
And that saved us a lot of the times. It was like, all right, I guess we got to do the hard work,
Stuck with each
you
other.
know.
Yeah.
But that's saved us, and that's beautiful, and I'm glad for it. And I think that that can be an overwhelming positive ingredient in the marriage and
Yeah.
commitment salad is like, oh, look at all this stuff. Look
Yeah.
at all these things we've built together. I don't want to even though I want to
Yes.
just like hold you down
Yeah.
and tickle you, as hard as I possibly
Yeah.
can. Let's work through this. Let's
Yeah.
get through this bullshit. I think that's cool, and I don't think it's ugly. I think that like any moment where you put your own stuff aside for the
Yeah.
betterment of another person, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
And it's, I wish people were more honest about, I mean, marriage is hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
And living with someone, take the marriage part out, just living with someone is hard. And I think that, again, and I sound like a broken record, we're fed all of these different narratives of what life should be and how we should be. And I remember at one point, just in life in general, but certainly my marriage was tied into this. I was like, this is fucking it, like this is not what I was told, marriage was, life was supposed to be, whatever. And so it takes some, and I'm still going through the process. I hope that I never stop evolving, but it takes a lot of inner dialogue and, working on your own demons. It takes, talking and working on your relationship demons. It's important to have conversations with your friends that you trust, and getting outside perspective and, which is true with anything. But I think going back to, marriage counseling, I remember being so petrified to tell all our friends
Right.
that we were in and literally not a single couple was like, everyone was like, oh yeah, me
we've done
too,
that
me
too,
too,
yeah.
me too,
Yeah,
me
we
too.
do
And
that.
I was just like, why don't we talk about these
Yeah,
things? It's
totally.
not anything.
That should be part of your
Yeah.
marriage counseling, is that you have to
Absolutely.
go
You have to
tell
go-
your
You
friends.
have
your
to tell
assignment.
everybody. Yeah.
I don't want to sound ignorant, but Luke is white, and
Yes.
and so does that play like a factor in your guys' relationship as well, just because he has a different experience in life, and you, especially maybe now, or has it always been? How do you navigate that
Yeah.
with him?
So it does play a part. So going back to what you had said, Jules, earlier, of like, I'm never going to know what that is like. The two most important people in my world are my mother and my husband. And they are both white, and they're never going to understand fully what it is to like navigate and move through the world as, a black woman. And that truthfully can be pretty lonely. And no matter how much they love on me, no matter, like my mom, I always tell her she needs to get a life because I'm her world, like she would do anything for me.
That's awesome.
And despite that, there is still this thing that she never ever can relate to, right? And so that can be a lonely space. And then also, truthfully, there are times in moments like this right now where I'm like, did I, fail black people because I'm in a relationship with a white man?
God, that's so
and-
crazy that's a thought.
And it's not like it's not even necessarily like it's not black people. That's me projecting my own kind of guilt onto the world. But there is this like in our culture, we don't see black love in a way that we need to, and we don't see, black people in the way that we need to. And so thoughts go through my mind of like, I could be one of those couples that is an example of black love and black motherhood and all of that. And so I do have conversations with myself of from guilt of like but overall I also talking about white woke people, my husband is the best ally that he could be outside of knowing my experience. And so, and I also am really proud of my white husband, and I'm really proud of my white mom, and I'm really proud of my white friends. And so, those conversations certainly go on internally in my head. But overall, it doesn't play a major factor in in other than guilt.
Yeah. So interesting because there's such a narrative switch that I have to make personally
Mm-hmm.
for myself, in that, growing up, uh, I assume, and even, up until recently, it's just like this idea of color blindness. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, I don't see any difference. I don't see anything like the, but that in itself is a problem because
Yep.
there is an inherent difference, and that I have to be able to see that,
Yep.
to be able to recognize that, to be able to not only just try to have compassion towards that thing, but to try to like stand up and do something
Mm-hmm.
about that thing as well. To actually see it and to address it and to embrace it and be there for it, because my whole life I've just been like, what the fuck is the difference? Like I'm just a kid. My dad's Ecuadorian, so I've always had a really weird time identifying as Latin American because I look like a white all American douchebag, and everybody, like, I'm an actor, and that's like my brand, that's my type. And so even more to like the point of just like I'm shitty at Spanish, like I don't know how to. So but it's weird because I'm white, so I like fall into the category of just being this Caucasian guy. But then I'm like, spend half my childhood in Ecuador, and I'm surrounded by a third world country of people who are poor and impoverished. And I don't know, it's just this really weird thing that I grew up with, and then I got into my adulthood, and I'm just like, oh yeah, man, like I'm no different, we're no different. But yeah, we are, we're
Yeah.
very different. And I was actually talking to a girl who was an actress who's similar to you. She's from London. Her dad is, I believe, her dad's white and her mom's black. And beautiful girl. She's an actress, and we were talking about our audition experiences together, and how like I was just like, oh yeah, like we were just trying to relate, and have this conversation about like, man, like the trials and tribulations of being actors and
Yeah.
going to auditions. And within like 5 minutes, I was like, I realized that there is no point in even having this conversation to try to relate our experiences. They're so far removed from each other's that it doesn't even make sense to be talking about. Like, we could be talking about what's completely opposite of our experiences, but by no means are they alike.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really important for me and for other people, for especially white people, to recognize that like it's not color blindness. It's not, that's not helping at all. And so to be able to recognize that there is a difference is so important, because then we can actually like recognize the beauty in that difference and try to do something about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, a few thoughts that just listening to you talk too is like, yes, seeing people's color is obviously vitally important, but I also think like listening to your story, and that you have this part of you that because you're passable is someone tonight. That's white supremacy in action as well, right?
Sure.
And then also there's Sandy Williams is she runs the Black Lens, which is an independent music or independent music. I sit on an independent music saving independent music venues board right now, so independent music is in my mind. It's an independent Black newspaper here in town, and she has a beloved community activist and educator and teacher and writer and just lovely human being. She also is the ED of the Carl Maxey Center, which is focused specifically on the East Central neighborhood in Spokane, but uplifting Black people and Black voices through that avenue as well. And her daughter lives in New York, and she tells a story. And this is, I hope I don't botch it. This is not necessarily my story to tell, but her daughter is highly educated and has a really incredible resume, and has what people think sounds like a Black name. And she recently was in between jobs in New York and applied to all of these different places and didn't get a single call back. They couldn't figure it out, and they couldn't figure it out. And Sandy was visiting her one time, and she's like, well, there is like this reality of, on paper, people thinking or perceiving that you might be Black. And so, and I excuse me for telling this story because I don't even know her name, but she switched her name slightly on her resume, and like within a couple of days got like 6 job offers. And that's happening in New York, right? With
Yeah.
the city that we think
Right. So
embraces
progressive
diversity and
yeah.
so progressive. And so I don't doubt that the friend of yours who is an actor, an actress in New York, is having those experiences. And again, the more that we talk about it, the more more that we call it out, the more that we identify it, the closer we are to actually doing something about it. So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You have done a really beautiful thing by arranging the 16 people, I believe, to come out and paint individual letters each on which it's a mural of the Black Lives Matter statement, and it's on what building is it on? If the actual space that you
Yeah, so the building owners are Jeff Oswald and Tyler Lafferty and Nick Murdo. They own a creative firm in town. Well, their sister companies, 7-2 and 14-4. So it's on Main Avenue in the heart of downtown Spokane.
we have a picture of it, Steve. If you can pull that up, that would be awesome. What's the response to that out here? I've seen a lot of like, Blue Lives Matter, Trump signs, stuff like that out here in Spokane, which, is what it is.
Yeah.
But I imagine that's probably pretty gut punching for a lot of people to see out here, which is gut punching to people like us to recognize as well.
Yeah.
Have there been like weird responses to it? And
Yeah, so I would say overwhelmingly, the community has been really amazing, and we've gotten an incredible outpouring of love and excitement. I am actually quite floored with just the carloads of people who are coming by to visit it. Not only Spokanites, but people from all over the nation.
Cool.
I've talked to someone from Chicago. I've talked to someone from San Francisco. I've talked to someone from Boise. I actually wasn't here for this, but one of the artists was there. There was a father and son that had been visiting all of the Black Lives Matter across the nation, and so they made a stop in Spokane.
Oh, cool.
So there has been an overwhelmingly positive outpouring of just love and support, and also real reflection. I sat there and observed night after night people spending a lot of time talking with each other about the bigger overall message, but also one of the things that I love about the mural, because there were 16 different artists involved, that there was a different human behind each letter,
Yeah.
and it really humanized, the intent around what Black Lives Matter means when you can actually connect that to a human being, right?
yeah,
And so it has been really, really incredible. It also has been ugly, and some of the artists, when they were creating, people would come by and say white power, and fuck you niggers, and it obviously was defaced. I don't know if you know
It
that,
was.
and so it was defaced. The word black was defaced with red, white, and blue paint. That made national news. That was awesome. And actually, I have, truthfully, I've had to kind of lock down my social media accounts to just friends. And also, my husband and I are talking about getting a security system because we have also had death threats. So it runs the gamut of I will say though that back to that metaphor of like kicking and screaming because change is happening, and there are always going to be people who are full of hate who want to try to squash that, but there are more people who are full of love who are embracing it. And so for me, it's not like I'm excited about the people who are pissed. Just don't read the comments. Just don't read the comments.
Yeah,
That's a
do
rule
it.
of thumb. That'll get you really depressed. But this might be
do it.
weird for me to try to twist this around, but the racist white supremacists wouldn't be reacting in the way that they are reacting if they didn't sense real change happening.
Totally.
And so that is...
It's doing its job.
It's doing its job.
Yeah.
And so, and I refuse. This is, again, the stubborn Scorpio in me. You can do what you want. You can say what you're not. You're on the wrong fucking side of history.
Yeah.
Like, go kicking and screaming. And we're going to continue on. We're
Yeah.
going to continue to push. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
So,
totally. It's so great to see you doing that and to have that attitude about it. And I will give a little bit of love back to New York in that there have been, and I've been gone the whole summer, but I was pretty active in the protests that were happening before I left, and I notice I get daily newsletters from I live in Bushwick, which is
Yeah.
a little district of Brooklyn, and I get Bushwick Daily every day. There's like hour on the hour protests happening
Yeah.
still today with like thousands of people out there doing it every single day,
Yeah.
over and over and over and over and over again, and it's just like awesome.
yeah.
Good on you.
Two of the quotes that have been really resonating with me throughout this time period is Kendrick Sampson, in an interview recently, said that there is no revolution without art. And then Nina Simone says something to the effect of it's the artist's job to reflect the times. And those two things have been really kind of going through my head over and over and over in this moment, and looking at the Black Lives Matter mural in Spokane, and then just kind of my role as an arts administrator. What does this look like? How do we continue this? And I'm getting really, really excited about again, the role of the artists in activism, art, large scale art interventions, advocacy around that, obviously working with Black artists and other artists of color to really flex our power, for lack of a better description, in this moment. And that is really exciting. I mean, there are lots of different things kind of going around in my head and then again, just the power of art and creativity. It draws people in, right?
Yeah.
So it's an easier entry point
Right.
for people who might be scared to have those conversations. It draws them in a way that makes them feel safe and able to start to ask the tough questions and have the tough conversations. And like, how beautiful and amazing is that? So that's just, it's really exciting and invigorating as well.
What do you have? What do you have in the works, and how have you pivoted from this pandemic? Like the last time we hung out, we did a small business live concert together that was put on by quite a few different organizations, highlighting your brick and mortar store from here,
Yep.
which is in the Riverfront Mall. That was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
How has it been since then? How have you pivoted? What is in the future that maybe you could touch on that you're excited about, beyond just like continuing to highlight artists in the community? Can you let us in on any of that?
Yeah. So this is highlighting artists. Well, it's highlighting artists and it's highlighting neighborhood voices. So, and this, we were working on this previously to COVID, but I don't know how much you guys know about the East Central neighborhood in Spokane. So the East Central neighborhood has always is one of the most diverse neighborhoods, if not the most diverse neighborhood in Spokane. It has always been an immigrant neighborhood in Spokane, and also have always had a huge Black population.
Okay.
And it was had a very vibrant, especially when the railroads and mining and everything were happening at the turn of the century, a very vibrant neighborhood. And then the building of I-90 happened, and highways and freeways system were often, a little historical nugget for you, seen as slum clearing projects. So, redlining and that certainly happened in Spokane with the building of I-90. So this neighborhood has been totally just decimated and ripped apart, and has really, struggled to recover in some ways since the building of I-90 in the 60s. And so there are a lot of students there who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and just a lot of low income housing. And yet it is just when you think of like the vibrancy of neighborhoods and what makes community, it's still there. And so oftentimes when we're talking about people of color or low income folks, we often view that through a lens of what is missing, when really an equally important story is to celebrate and to recognize all that is still there, right? That resilience that is still there. And so we got some seed money from the former mayor to do a youth project in Spokane. And he didn't care what it was just do a youth project. And so as we started to think about what that might look like, my father grew up in the East Central neighborhood. He has strong connections to the East Central neighborhood. East Central, in some ways, the Perry District is becoming gentrified. And so, and there is... it's becoming gentrified. And so, again, we just started to kind of permeate on a project that would celebrate all that is present there, despite like the shit that's been thrown at them. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the French photographer artist JR. He does this really incredible photographic work that reflects communities or neighborhoods of people. And so if you've ever seen the child or the baby looking over the wall at the border, that big piece, that's JR.
Oh, cool.
So we were like really inspired by his work and brought an idea to the neighborhood because we really wanted it to be community neighborhood led. We didn't want, even though I'm a Black woman, and I didn't want the neighborhood to feel like, Terrain was like doing a project to them. We wanted to do a project with them. We wanted them to be the architects of what was happening. So we've stumbled upon this idea of that while it's going to be focused on kind of the kids and the youth of the neighborhood, it's also going to be, the really pivotal, important leaders in that neighborhood too. And we are going to work with two local artists, Carl Richardson and Ronaldo Zil-Gambrano. And we're going to take photographs of everyone who wants to participate in the neighborhood. And then Ronaldo is this amazing wood carver, printmaker here in town. He is internationally collected. Pay attention to him. He's a really incredible artist. And we're going to collect people's stories. And so the idea is to, as big as possible, we're hoping for 2 to 3 stories to cover a building of the faces of the neighborhood, and then use the wood blocks to, as we collect their stories, to carve their narratives into the story, and then interlay those on top of the photos. So you have this big, piece of public art that again shows just the resilience and the power and the beauty of the people of the neighborhood. And then coupled with that, depending on how much funding we can raise, we're kind of in the fundraising stages right now, is making sure, I don't know if you guys are familiar with StoryCorps, but collecting those stories so they can live digitally, so people can always go and revisit those people or those stories of the neighborhood. So it's almost kind of for like a time capsule of who the neighborhood is right now. And yeah, just, it's documenting, it's celebrating, and also too, it's like, I could also get super geeky with you guys in terms of like social determinants of health and all of what that looks like. But when people are given access to art opportunities like this, and they are able to see themselves reflected in such a beautiful way, it creates, tighter knit community, it creates pride of place, it creates healthier, mental, stability and all of those sorts of things. So that's one project
That's amazing.
that we're super excited about. And we have a few other things
That's
up our sleeves.
That's one of the 66,441.
Do you have a location for that yet?
So we have a location that I'm sad to report I don't think is going to happen. So there is this big, beautiful turn of the century church on 8th and Arthur and 8th in East Central neighborhood that has rumor has it has been sitting empty for many years, but there's also rumor that someone might be living in it. We've done some kind of digging and calling of the owner who hasn't returned our phone calls. But the idea was that church at one time was a black church in the neighborhood, and to be able to do a project on the walls on the outside of that church was something that we were really excited about. We tie it in. We have this program called Window Dressing, and what it is it's doing site-specific art installations in vacant buildings. Our main focus has been in the downtown core in Spokane, but this was going to be kind of like an evolution of that. So originally we wanted something where we were taking, an abandoned space or a raw space and adding vibrancy to it. And we still very much have that mindset. But also the Carl Maxey Center, who I mentioned earlier, Sandy's center, has expressed interest in potentially at least siting part of the project at the Carl Maxey Center, which again would be amazing because there's that direct connection there. And then if we're able to raise enough money, I would love to blanket all different parts of East Central with, whether it's under, a bridge or it's in a park. Why not fill the whole entire,
Wow.
neighborhood,
Yeah,
or
totally.
2 or 3 spots in the neighborhood of the faces of the people who just make this neighborhood so great. So, so we're in the fundraising stages. I'm hoping that by summer of 2021, we'll have a location solidified and we'll be able to install that piece. And there's a lot of neighborhood community engagement that needs to take place as we're bringing that project to fruition. But yeah.
Is there a way that our listeners could help in that fundraising? Is there a link or a location that they might be able to?
So you can always donate at trainspokane.com/donate. What we should do is we'll create a little button. Right now we have one that's just donate to Train, just donate to the mural, the Black Lives Matter mural. We could create one for the East Central Neighborhood Project,
Cool.
and people could specifically say, this is what I want my money to go to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can make that happen.
That's so
That'd
cool.
be
So
awesome.
if you're interested in helping Terrain and Ginger with this project, head on over to Spokane.com/donate.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want
And you'll be able to give specifically to that.
I want to do that. And as I listen to you talk, Ginger, I can't help but kind of reflect on the conversation earlier about how you kind of maintain your mental sanity through all of this stuff. And you're so seemingly purpose driven with all of this stuff, and it seems to be making you whole through the action of what you're doing. You don't need yoga. You don't need exercise. You're doing all of that stuff through this process in which you're trying to build out your community, and that's where we're all trying to get to in our yoga practices and in our exercise practices, and how we kind of cultivate our mental health. You're doing it through the work that you're actually doing, and it's awesome because it's right in the core of what you're doing. And I'm gonna go and donate, and I encourage every single person that's listening to this to do the same thing, because I just want to be such a champion of yours and Luke's and Terrain and everything you guys are doing. God, it's so cool, and I just I feel inspired to almost stop exercising and start focusing on something that's more purpose oriented, so that I can be and that's kind of what this is. But man, it's so refreshing, and I know that it's easier said than done, everything that you're talking about here, but it's really refreshing and inspiring to hear you talk about all this stuff, and it just I feel really inspired by you and your whole story and everything that you've been talking about here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for those words. I actually, you just filled my heart with so much joy. I've never actually thought about the work in those terms.
Does it
and
make sense?
It makes total sense.
Yeah, I think so too.
And
I think that's where the balance comes from.
yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And So thank you for that. Like,
Thank you. Yeah.
I kind of have chills going down.
I
like
do
that.
too.
What's interesting is that we can find, like, you've managed to find that balance sort of unconsciously. It seems like, right? You're saying like, nobody's ever put it to me like that, but somehow this random combination of experience has led you to a place where you are so invigorated by helping others, and you're so I saw you just light up when you're talking about this East Central project, right? You're just like, man, we could put the art over here.
Yeah, totally.
Like you were
Yeah.
literally, your eyes were
Yeah,
just
yeah,
glowing.
it's the best.
It's like, oh, this is what is offsetting this this weight, this weight that you just have. You were born into this situation where you have a weight on your shoulders, and this help and this kindness and this compassion and throwing people on your shoulders and promoting and highlighting their experience. That's like the wonderful
Yeah.
balance that's keeping you sane, because every time we hang out, I'm always like, oh man, Ginger just seems like she has her shit together so much.
Well,
There's a little bit of
I was like,
yeah, I don't know.
I got Dijon mustard just all over my chin right now. And,
well, to piggyback off that too, I think there's your self-esteem comes from not the accolades in which you acquire through your life. You're not just like, oh, like your self-esteem isn't coming from like going and selling out concerts all over the country. My self-esteem isn't from going and landing a role on a television show. Like your self-esteem really comes from helping other people, and you start to really get that sense of elevated self-esteem when you can go to like I've done for myself, to like a children's hospital and made a friend and felt like I've helped somebody. I'm just like, I feel great.
Yeah.
I feel so lifted right now from this experience. And so that's where that's why you you don't seem to have your shit together. You do have your shit together because your platform is to help others. And that's like, it's something to strive for in everybody's approach to life. And I think like if you're struggling with your self-esteem, if you're struggling with like the pandemic, if you're struggling in any regard right now, go fucking help somebody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
You know?
I was thinking about that. We were talking about things that we're fed. I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, oh, we're just fed this, we're fed this perception of what we believe is going to satiate this human appetite. And I'm like, what if it's what we eat? What if it's not what we're being fed, but what we choose to eat? And like what we choose to eat is the gram and the Facebook and the news, and like of course these people are feeding it to us, but we have the right and we have the choice to eat it or not.
Yeah.
And if we choose to eat compassion and uplifting others and family and long form conversation, it doesn't matter what people put in front of us, right? It doesn't matter that there's a Taco Bell and a KFC and a Burger King. As long as we go to the local farmer's market and we grab the nourishing foods, right? Like we're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I brought that up. I was just thinking, I've just been thinking about that a lot recently, because there is so much being thrown at us constantly, and some of it's always going to get in.
Yep.
There's always just, regardless of how protective you are of your eyes and how protective of you are of, right, like you are what you eat. Our parents would always say, you are what you eat. Always a little bit of it is going to get in, but be picky. Right? Like we're so picky about the food that we put in our body nowadays. It's a privilege to be able to pick and choose what we eat and what we don't. And we should be that picky and that choosy about the over-processed information that gets chucked our way too, right? Like we got to be protective of our eyes and our minds and our spirits, and utilize our energy not for being fed, but utilize our energy for eating.
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat this. I'm gonna choose to spend time with these people. I'm gonna choose to talk and have conversations with this type of human. I think that you are being very very picky and very not picky sounds like a shit word, but you're being precise about what you eat, Ginger, and that's led itself to what I would describe as a really positive and influential human being in my life specifically and in the community. So thank you so much for being choosy, bud.
I think what Alan's also saying is stop following Khloe Kardashian and start following Ginger Ewing. If you're welcoming to
or maybe
people
just
to come and
just quit following.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's-
just quit following and start walking.
I will say too, it's so we all fall into that trap, right? You
Yeah.
know, like I'll post something, I'll be like, why the fuck did I only get 46? You know, like whatever. That's
Yeah.
just like so stupid. And then I take my 3 flat-faced dogs
Yeah.
on a walk, and I'm like,
It's all the
you
self-esteem you
know?
need.
And yeah, it's a constant reminder and it's constant work. But you could philosophize all day,
Yeah.
the both of you to me, and I would eat it up. I would consciously eat it up.
Yeah.
There we go. Choose what you eat. Be careful what you eat. Ginger, thank you so much
God,
for being
you're
on the
such a
show
legend.
and for
Thank
sharing. Will you
you.
come back?
Of course, I'd love to come back. And you guys, this is so fun and so needed, and is going to be so impactful. And I feel a little bit bad that our conversation was so serious, because
I
you guys
don't.
had like this,
Well, let's have-
good balance of
We'll
like
talk about
levity.
pooping our
We
pants
can talk about
on
pooping our
Act
pants
2.
next time.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
No,
one.
I think you've successfully expanded our empathy
Yeah.
as people, and that's huge. And hopefully the people that have listened as well.
It's good work. It's
It's
good
awesome.
work. You
Yeah.
do good work, Ginger.
Well, like I said, I think that this brings me hope, and so thank you. And yeah, I need this in my life as
So do
well.
we.
So
Yeah.
Everybody
you.
needs a little bit
Yeah.
more of
Yeah.
this. This is good stuff.
Like we're best
Thank you
friends.
for sharing it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
yeah,
for
thank
sharing
you
your
so
time
much,
with us
Ginger.
and for sharing your honesty and authenticity with us and
And being
your
so transparent.
experience with us. Is there any place that where should we send our viewers to help support you, to help support what you're up to?
I think, again, just trainspokane.com is a good starting point just to see kind of the work that we do in the community. We do have a retail storefront in River Park Square called From Here. And there are, it kind of ebbs and flows, but there are currently 72 creative businesses, all local, that are selling out at that shop.
Yeah, dude.
And going back to kind of the people who are struggling in this moment, those businesses certainly could use y'all's support. So check us out there. We also have an online store from here, spokane.com. And yeah, just you can always hit us up if you have ideas. We love to collaborate. We wouldn't be who we are if it wasn't for partnerships and collaborating with other individuals and organizations. So we're always curious to hear your ideas. So throw them our way.
Thank you so much, Ginger. You're a legend.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks so much for coming on, Ginger.
Oh, boo-boo, did you just make it to the end of the video? Yes, you did. Do you want to see more videos just like this one? Do you?
Well, then head over to patreon.com/Live at the Lodge, where you can support the How Good's This podcast, as well as the entire Live at the Lodge family.
Yep, yeah, you're going to get exclusive merch, personalized shout-out videos. Me and Jules, we're going to show up at your house and baptize your nephew, huh? Check it out, patreon.com/Live at the Lodge.